The morning light filtered through the blinds of my corner office as I adjusted the Montblanc pen on my desk, the same pen Nathan had once told me was too extravagant for someone in my position. I smoothed my silk blouse and glanced at the clock, 9:45 a.m. In exactly 15 minutes, my husband of 8 years would be escorted by security to the executive floor, unaware that the surprise meeting in conference room A wasn't about his expected promotion, but rather his termination. What Nathan also didn't know was that the signature at the bottom of his dismissal papers belonged to the new majority shareholder of Pinnacle Technologies, me. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, and for 3 long years, I had been meticulously preparing this meal, while appearing to be nothing more than a recovering ex-employee struggling to rebuild her life. As I watched through the one-way glass of my office, I could see Nathan arriving at the reception desk, straightening his tie with that familiar gesture of confidence. The same confidence he had when he drained our joint account of $68,000 while I lay in a hospital bed fighting for my life. The same confidence that had sustained him as he built his career on ideas he'd stolen from my personal files. How perfectly fitting that his world would collapse in exactly the same way mine once had, without warning, and orchestrated by the person he trusted most. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I wasn't always Emily Wilson, CEO and majority shareholder of Pinnacle Technologies. 3 years ago, I was simply Emily Wilson, marketing specialist with a knack for coding that few people knew about. Nathan and I had met during my first week at Pinnacle. He worked in product development, 2 floors above marketing, and we'd bumped into each other in the cramped elevator of the old office building. He had that charismatic smile that made everyone feel like they were the most important person in the room. For a woman who'd grown up being overlooked, that attention was intoxicating. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Dinner dates at Harborview Restaurant overlooking the Willamette River, weekend trips to the Oregon coast, and late nights discussing our dreams under the stars. Within a year, we were married in a small ceremony at Portland Japanese Garden, surrounded by cherry blossoms and well-wishers. We moved into a modest apartment in the lakeside complex, combining our savings to plan for a future that seemed bright with promise. Nathan spoke of executive ambitions. I dreamed of developing healthcare software that could make a real difference. We were the perfect Portland tech couple, ambitious, forward-thinking, and seemingly unstoppable together. The first cracks appeared, so subtly I almost missed them. Nathan began staying later at the office, his explanations growing more vague. He'd casually ask about my marketing projects, showing particular interest in the coding work I was doing on the side, a patient data integration platform that I believed could revolutionize hospital record systems. I shared everything with him, from my preliminary sketches to the breakthrough algorithm I'd developed during a weekend coding marathon. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband, my partner, my most trusted confidant. Then came the appendicitis, except it wasn't just appendicitis. What should have been a routine procedure turned complicated when my appendix ruptured during surgery, leading to a severe infection. What was supposed to be a 2-day hospital stay turned into 3 weeks at Cedar Ridge Medical Center, with IV antibiotics and multiple follow-up surgeries. Through the fog of pain medication and fever, I remembered Nathan's increasingly infrequent visits, his distracted manner when he did come, always checking his phone, always having to leave for just one quick work emergency. On day 12, Dr. Reynolds came into my room with an uncomfortable expression. "Mrs. Wilson, we've been trying to process your insurance claims, but there seems to be an issue with the payments. Do you have alternate means to cover the mounting costs?" That was the first domino. Still weak from infection, I called our bank from my hospital bed only to discover our joint account, the one containing our life savings of $68,000, had been completely emptied. All transfers had been authorized by Nathan just 3 days after my hospitalization. My separate personal account, containing a modest $3,200, remained untouched, likely an oversight on his part. Panic rising, I called Nathan's cell phone, straight to voicemail. I called his office. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wilson is in meetings all day," his assistant informed me with practiced politeness. I called our apartment. No answer. I called Kevin Patel, Nathan's closest friend at Pinnacle. Awkward silence, then. "Emily, I thought you knew. Nathan's been assigned to the Singapore project. He flew out yesterday. It's a 6-month assignment. Fast-tracked promotion. Everyone's talking about it." The second domino, a hasty email from Nathan, arrived that evening. Corporate opportunity. Of a lifetime. Couldn't pass it up. Needed the savings for relocation and expenses. Would explain everything soon. Loved me. Would make it up to me. The third domino fell the next morning. A courier delivered divorce papers to my hospital room. Irreconcilable differences. Nathan wanted a clean break, no alimony, a quick dissolution. The document had already been notarized, waiting only for my signature. The fourth and final domino, a pink slip. While I was still hospitalized, Pinnacle Technologies determined my extended absence constituted abandonment of position. My termination was effective immediately. My health insurance canceled. The timing couldn't have been coincidental. Later, I would learn that Nathan had been promoted to Vice President of Product Development on the strength of a breakthrough healthcare data integration platform he had developed. My platform, my code, my dream. I could have crumbled completely. Part of me wanted to. But as I lay in that sterile hospital room, something crystallized within me. A cold, clear purpose that burned through the fog of betrayal. I would not just survive this. I would methodically dismantle the life Nathan had built on my destruction. Not with the emotional outbursts he might expect from the woman he'd married, but with the calculated precision he never knew I possessed. My first ally came from an unexpected source. Sophia Martinez, a nurse at Cedar Ridge who had taken special interest in my case, sat with me during her breaks. "My brother's a lawyer," she told me one evening as she checked my IV. "Pro bono work. For people screwed by the system. Let me give him a call." Marco Martinez became the first piece in my chess game. He helped me file for emergency medical coverage and negotiated with the hospital for a payment plan. The divorce, we would delay, finding every procedural roadblock possible. "We're not just playing defense," Marco explained, his eyes sharp, with strategic thinking that matched my own emerging plan. "We're buying time." Time was what I needed most. Time to heal physically. Time to secure temporary housing in a small studio apartment that I could afford with my rapidly dwindling funds. Time to begin the meticulous research that would become my roadmap to retribution. The Portland tech community was surprisingly small, and whispers traveled fast. Nathan's miraculous breakthrough was making waves, especially when Pinnacle announced their new healthcare platform, Genesis, at the Portland Tech Summit. I watched the live stream from my studio apartment, seeing Nathan take center stage beside CEO Richard Hartman, accepting accolades for his visionary innovation. My innovation, my code. Even the name, Genesis, had come from a napkin sketch I'd done during one of our date nights at Riverside Cafe. "It's too blatant," Marco said when I showed him the evidence that Nathan had stolen my work. "But without a patent filing beforehand, proving it belonged to you first is nearly impossible, especially against a company with Pinnacle's legal resources." "Then we don't fight on their terms," I replied, the strategy already forming. "We play a longer game." My recovery was slow but deliberate, every step calculated. I began freelance marketing work, building a modest client list while living frugally. Every spare dollar went into my plan. Every spare moment was devoted to coding, not recreating what Nathan had stolen, but building something better, more comprehensive, more revolutionary. I worked through nights, fueled by green tea and determination, advancing my original concept into something Nathan and Pinnacle could never have envisioned. 6 months into my plan, I made my first significant move. Andrew Collins, founder of rival firm Horizon Solutions, was holding a recruitment event at the convention center. I wore my most professional outfit, second-hand but carefully tailored, and carried a portfolio containing just enough of my work to pique interest without revealing my full capabilities. "Your marketing background is solid," Andrew said after reviewing my portfolio, "but it's not what makes you stand out. These interface designs show an unusual understanding of user experience in healthcare settings." I offered a modest smile. "I've had some personal experience with hospital systems. It gives me perspective." "Well, we're looking for marketing support, not developers, but I appreciate the conversation." As he began to wrap up our meeting, I slid a small flash drive across the table. "Perhaps review this when you have a moment. It might change the conversation." The flash drive contained a demo of what I called Phoenix Platform, a deliberately ironic name for something rising from the ashes of Genesis. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. It showcased just enough of my new system to demonstrate its superior architecture without revealing its full capabilities. 2 days later, Andrew's call came at 11 p.m. "I need to meet with you immediately. This isn't a marketing position we're discussing anymore." Horizon Solutions hired me as a marketing technology specialist, a vague title that allowed me to work on Phoenix while maintaining a low profile. The salary was modest, but included stock options, exactly what I needed. I maintained a deliberately understated presence, working diligently while gathering intelligence on Pinnacle's operations. Portland's tech social scene became my information network, with carefully cultivated connections feeding me details about Nathan's project and its growing problems. Genesis was failing. Not publicly, not yet, but internally the cracks were showing. The platform couldn't scale as promised. Hospitals reported integration issues. Nathan was scrambling, but without the fundamental understanding of the code he'd stolen, he couldn't fix what he'd never truly built. Meanwhile, I lived in calculated modesty. My studio apartment remained sparsely furnished. My wardrobe stayed practical and unassuming. I drove the same used Honda I'd purchased after the hospital. To anyone watching, and I suspected Nathan occasionally had Kevin check up on me, I appeared to be barely staying afloat. The perfect portrait of a discarded wife struggling to rebuild after betrayal. The facade was essential because behind it, Phoenix was soaring. Andrew had provided the resources and protection I needed to develop the platform to its full potential. 18 months after joining Horizon, we quietly filed for patents, not just on the original concepts Nathan had stolen, but on dozens of innovations I'd developed since. 6 months after that, we began approaching select hospitals for pilot programs, securing contracts away from Pinnacle with remarkable ease given the growing dissatisfaction with Genesis. Throughout this period, the divorce proceedings dragged on, with Marco finding ingenious delays at every turn. Nathan's initial anger had given way to impatience, then to a grudging increase in settlement offers, which we systematically rejected. "He's getting desperate," Marco observed after the latest court postponement. "Pinnacle must be putting pressure on him to resolve this cleanly." "Let him stew," I replied, checking the latest stock reports. Pinnacle's shares had dropped another 3 points following a disastrous quarterly report. Their healthcare division, now, Nathan's primary responsibility, was bleeding money and clients. 2 years and 7 months into my plan, the critical moment arrived. Richard Hartman, Pinnacle's long-standing CEO, announced his retirement, triggering a leadership restructuring and, most crucially, a stock sell-off by key investors concerned about the company's direction. Through a complex network of shell companies and private investors that Marco had helped arrange, I was positioned to acquire those shares at a strategic discount. The purchase had to be executed with perfect timing and complete anonymity. If Nathan or anyone at Pinnacle discovered my involvement prematurely, everything would collapse. For 3 nerve-wracking weeks, I maintained my unremarkable daily routine, while orchestrating the largest financial move of my life. The final paperwork came through on a rainy Tuesday afternoon as I sat in Riverside Cafe, the same place where I'd first sketched Genesis on a napkin all those years ago. With that signature, I became the majority shareholder of Pinnacle Technologies. The company that had fired me while I lay in a hospital bed was now effectively mine. The week that followed required the most difficult act of all, maintaining normalcy while the board was privately informed of the change in ownership. Richard Hartman's retirement party became the perfect cover for my first move. The exclusive event at the Bridgeview Hotel would gather all of Pinnacle's executives, including Nathan, now desperately trying to salvage both his failing division and his reputation. The morning of the party, I finally abandoned my practiced modesty. The understated studio apartment was vacated, with movers transferring my few belongings to a penthouse overlooking the river. My used Honda was traded for the Tesla I'd secretly purchased months earlier, but kept in storage. The secondhand clothes were replaced by a wardrobe that befitted my new position. The transformation wasn't about vanity, it was about power and perception, about stepping fully into the role I had meticulously prepared for. Standing in my new corner office at Pinnacle Technologies, I watched through one-way glass as Nathan strutted through the reception area, nodding confidently to employees, who had no idea their world was about to change. I checked my watch again. 9:58 a.m. 2 minutes until the meeting where Nathan expected to discuss his department's future, but would instead face his own termination. Diana Foster from HR entered my office, termination papers in hand. "Everything's prepared as you requested, Ms. Wilson. The security team is in position. We can proceed whenever you're ready." I signed the final document and handed it back to her. "Thank you, Diana. I believe it's time to reintroduce myself to my husband." As I walked toward conference room A, I felt no rush of vengeful adrenaline, no desperate need to see Nathan suffer. What I felt was calmer, more complete, the satisfaction of a chess player seeing all pieces aligned for an inevitable checkmate. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, about consequence, about restoring balance to a world that had been violently upended 3 years ago. I paused at the door, straightened my silk blouse, and entered the room where Nathan sat waiting for a meeting that would change everything, just not in the way he expected. The look on his face as I walked through that door made 3 years of careful planning absolutely worth it. I pushed open the heavy mahogany door of conference room A, savoring the moment as reality crystallized around me. Nathan sat at the far end of the polished table, scrolling through his phone with that familiar look of impatient confidence. He wore the custom-tailored navy suit he'd purchased after his promotion to VP, a suit I'd later learned was charged to his corporate account as a business expense. When he heard the door open, he glanced up with practiced casualness, expecting to see Richard Hartman or perhaps Diana from HR. The recognition didn't come immediately. 3 years had changed me in ways beyond the designer clothes and new hairstyle. The woman who had once gazed at him with adoration had been replaced by someone entirely different, someone with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a posture that commanded respect rather than requested it. "Emily?" His voice caught between surprise and confusion. He half rose from his chair, his body seemingly uncertain whether to approach me or maintain distance. His eyes darted to the door behind me, clearly expecting others to enter. "What are you doing here? This is a restricted area." I allowed myself a small smile as I closed the door and walked to the opposite end of the conference table. "Is that any way to greet your wife, Nathan? Though I suppose wife is technically still accurate, given how effectively your attorney has been dragging out our divorce proceedings." Confusion flickered across his face, quickly replaced by the condescending expression I knew so well. If this is about the settlement, my offer is final. You should have taken it months ago. Having your lawyer ambush me at my workplace won't change anything. I placed my leather portfolio on the table and took a seat, gesturing for him to do the same. This isn't about our divorce settlement, Nathan. Please sit down. Security gets uncomfortable when executives remain standing during termination meetings. The word termination hit him like a physical blow. He sank back into his chair, his face cycling through expressions: confusion, disbelief, then nervous, amusement. Very funny. Where's Richard? Is this some kind of practical joke before my promotion announcement? I opened my portfolio and removed a document bearing Pinnacle Technologies letterhead. Richard Hartman no longer makes executive decisions at this company. As for your promotion, I slid the paper across the polished mahogany surface. I'm afraid there's been a change of plans. Nathan stared at the document without touching it, as though it might burn him. The bold heading, Notice of Termination, was clearly visible even from his side of the table. His complexion paled as his eyes darted between the paper and my face. This is absurd. You can't. There's no way you could. He stopped, his mind finally processing the implications. Who are you working for? Is this Collins? Did Horizon put you up to this? I leaned forward slightly, maintaining perfect composure. I don't work for Andrew Collins, Nathan. As of last week, I am the majority shareholder of Pinnacle Technologies. The board has unanimously approved my appointment as CEO, effective immediately. My first executive decision was to conduct a complete audit of the healthcare division, particularly the Genesis platform. The blood drained from his face so rapidly I thought he might faint. That's impossible. There's no way you could afford. It's amazing what one can accomplish with the right strategy and patience, I interrupted smoothly. While you were destroying Genesis with your lack of understanding of its foundational architecture, I was building something better. Phoenix has secured contracts with 17 healthcare systems that formerly used Pinnacle's services. The resulting stock devaluation created a perfect acquisition opportunity. Nathan's shock transformed into anger, his default response when cornered. This is about revenge. You're destroying a company because of a personal grudge. On the contrary, I'm saving a company despite a personal grievance. I removed another document from my portfolio, a comprehensive analysis of Genesis's failures and the financial impact on Pinnacle. Your division has lost $42 million in the past 18 months. 4 major hospital systems have filed breach of contract suits due to implementation failures. Your team has the highest turnover rate in the company's history. I tapped a finger on the termination notice. You're not being fired because you stole my money, filed for divorce while I was recovering from life-threatening complications, or even because you stole my intellectual property. You're being terminated because you're fundamentally incompetent. Nathan, you always have been. His face flushed crimson. You think you can just walk in here and... The door opened behind me, and Diana Foster entered with 2 security officers. Everything in order, Ms. Wilson? She asked with professional detachment. Mr. Wilson was just reviewing his termination documentation, I replied without taking my eyes off Nathan. He'll need to be escorted to collect his personal belongings, and then security will accompany him from the premises. Nathan rose from his chair, desperation replacing anger. Diana, this is insane. Call Richard immediately. There's been some kind of mistake. Diana's expression remained impassive. Mr. Hartman no longer has authority at Pinnacle, Mr. Wilson. Ms. Wilson is now CEO. All termination protocols are being followed according to company policy, the same policy you helped implement for executive dismissals last year. I stood, gathering my portfolio. Your access has already been revoked, Nathan. The company car service will take you home. Your final compensation package is outlined in the termination document, contingent upon signing the non-disclosure agreement. I paused, allowing myself one moment of pure, undiluted satisfaction. Oh, and I'll have my lawyer contact yours regarding the expedited processing of our divorce. I believe we've delayed long enough, don't you? The security officers moved to flank him. Nathan's shoulders slumped as the full reality of his situation finally registered. "You planned this," he whispered, his voice hollow with disbelief. "All of it. For how long?" I picked up my portfolio and walked to the door, turning back for one final look at the man who had once been the center of my world. From the moment I saw that empty bank account, Nathan, the moment I realized exactly who you were. I nodded to the security team. "Gentlemen, please ensure Mr. Wilson leaves the premises within the hour. His company devices will need to be surrendered immediately." As I walked away, I heard Nathan call after me, his voice cracking with a desperation I'd never heard from him before. "Emily, wait! We can talk about this. There's an explanation for everything. The money, the divorce. It wasn't what you think." I didn't turn back. There was nothing more to say, nothing more to hear. The heavy door of conference room A closed, behind me with a satisfying click of finality. The news of Nathan's abrupt departure and my appointment as CEO spread through Pinnacle Technologies like wildfire. By noon, my inbox was flooded with meeting requests from department heads eager to secure their positions under the new leadership. Kevin Patel, Nathan's closest ally and the man who had known about his betrayal from the beginning, had already cleared out his office, not waiting for the inevitable termination notice that would have followed. I spent the afternoon in back-to-back meetings with key personnel, evaluating who would stay and who would go in the reorganization I had planned. The senior staff gathered in the main conference room at 4 o'clock, nervously awaiting their first official meeting with the new CEO. Many still processing the shock that the woman they'd previously known only as Nathan Wilson's ex was now controlling their professional futures. "Thank you for adjusting your schedules on such short notice," I began, standing at the head of the table where Richard Hartman had presided for the past 15 years. "I understand today's changes have been unexpected and potentially concerning for many of you. Let me be clear about my intentions for Pinnacle Technologies." I activated the presentation screen, displaying a comprehensive strategic roadmap I'd prepared months in advance. This company has tremendous potential and remarkable talent. Unfortunately, it has been hampered by mismanagement in key divisions and a corporate culture that rewards visibility over value. That changes today. For the next hour, I outlined my vision for Pinnacle's future: the integration of Phoenix platform to replace the failing Genesis system, restructuring of departments to eliminate redundancy, and a complete overhaul of the company's approach to intellectual property development and protection. The tension in the room gradually shifted from anxiety to cautious interest as staff realized I wasn't there to dismantle the company, but to transform it. "You've all received folders containing individual meeting schedules for tomorrow," I concluded. "Those meetings will determine your roles moving forward. Come prepared to discuss your contributions to your departments, your ideas for improvement, and your professional goals. Talent will be recognized and rewarded regardless of tenure or previous management relationships." As the meeting dispersed, several executives lingered, attempting to establish early allegiance with subtle compliments and assurances of support. I acknowledged them politely but made no commitments. Every relationship within Pinnacle would need to be rebuilt from the ground up, every loyalty earned rather than assumed. By 7 in the evening, the executive floor had emptied except for my new assistant Michael, who had replaced Nathan's loyal secretary immediately upon my appointment. "Your car is waiting, Ms. Wilson," he informed me. "And Mr. Martinez called to confirm your dinner reservation at Harborview Restaurant has been moved to the private dining room as requested." "Thank you, Michael. Please arrange for the security. Logs from Mr. Wilson's office to be delivered to my penthouse tonight. I want to review his access activity for the past 6 months before tomorrow's IT restructuring meeting." The drive to Harborview Restaurant gave me my first moment of true solitude since the morning's confrontation. As the executive car wound through downtown Portland's evening traffic, I watched the city lights reflecting on the Willamette River and allowed myself to feel the full weight of the day's events. It wasn't the vindictive satisfaction I might have expected years ago. Instead, I felt a profound sense of closure, as though a long, complex mathematical equation had finally balanced perfectly. Marco Martinez was waiting in the private dining room, a bottle of champagne already chilling beside the table. His three-piece suit and polished appearance were a far cry from the earnest young lawyer who had first taken my case pro bono 3 years earlier. Success had found us both. "To the new CEO of Pinnacle Technologies," he said, raising his glass after the server had poured the champagne and discreetly withdrawn. "Was it everything you imagined it would be?" I clinked my glass against his. More efficient than I expected, less emotionally fraught. Nathan's world collapsed with remarkable speed once the foundation was removed. Marco nodded thoughtfully. Men like him rely on systems they don't understand and confidence they haven't earned. They're always one revelation away from catastrophe. He sipped his champagne. "The board didn't give you any trouble about the healthcare division restructuring?" On the contrary. Once I demonstrated how Phoenix could be implemented to fulfill the existing Genesis contracts, they were almost pathetically grateful. The class action lawsuit from the hospital systems had them terrified of personal liability. Our conversation paused as the server returned with our appetizers. When we were alone again, Marco's expression grew more serious. "Have you thought about what comes next, Emily? You've achieved everything you set out to do. Acquired the company, fired Nathan, salvaged your intellectual property, and secured your financial future. What happens after revenge?" The question caught me by surprise. For 3 years, every waking moment had been devoted to my carefully orchestrated plan. I had visualized this day countless times, but I had rarely thought beyond it. Pinnacle has enormous potential with the right leadership. The integration of Phoenix alone will take at least 18 months of focused work. Marco studied me over the rim of his glass. "That's the CEO speaking. I'm asking what Emily wants now that the chess game is won." I gazed out at the river view, the same scenery Nathan and I had admired during our courtship, though now seen from a private dining room rather than the main restaurant. "I want to build something lasting," I said finally. "Something that matters." The revenge was necessary, but it was never the end goal. Phoenix can transform healthcare data integration and improve patient outcomes in ways Genesis never could. That's what drove me even during the darkest days. "From destruction to creation," Marco mused. "A natural progression. Not destruction," I corrected. "Reclamation. Everything that happened today was about taking back what was mine. My work, my dignity, my future. The company is just a vehicle for what comes next." Our dinner continued with discussion of more practical matters, the finalization of my divorce, the press strategy for announcing Pinnacle's new direction, the remaining legal hurdles for fully integrating Phoenix into the company's portfolio. Marco had transitioned from pro bono savior to highly paid corporate counsel, but his fundamental decency remained unchanged. He was perhaps the only person who had witnessed every step of my journey from hospital bed to executive suite. "There's one more thing you should know," he said as we finished our dessert. "Nathan attempted to access your old apartment this afternoon after leaving Pinnacle. The security monitoring we established flagged his presence immediately." My fork paused halfway to my mouth. What was he looking for? "We can only speculate, but given the timing, likely any evidence of your connection to Phoenix or documentation of your acquisition strategy. The property management company followed the protocol we established and denied him entry." I set down my fork. My appetite suddenly diminished. Have security at the penthouse doubled tonight, and add additional monitoring to all access points at Pinnacle. Nathan's desperation makes him unpredictable. Marco nodded, already typing instructions to his security team. It's already done. Additionally, I've arranged for temporary restraining orders to be processed first thing tomorrow. His activity at your former residence gives us the justification we need. As the evening concluded and we prepared to leave, Marco hesitated at the door. You know he'll try to contact you again. Men like Nathan can't accept defeat, especially at the hands of someone they've underestimated. Let him try, I replied, gathering my coat. Every attempt he makes only strengthens our legal position. Nathan has always believed himself to be the smartest person in any room. That delusion will be his final undoing. The executive car dropped Marco at his downtown law office before continuing to my new penthouse in the Westbrook Tower. The building's security team had been tripled, as promised, with additional personnel stationed discreetly throughout the lobby and private elevator access points. While the measures might have seemed excessive to an outside observer, I understood Nathan's psychology too well to underestimate his reaction to today's events. My new home occupied the entire top floor of the Westbrook, with panoramic views of Portland's skyline and the mountains beyond. The space was deliberately designed as an antithesis to the cramped, sparse apartment I'd maintained during my years of planning. Open, light-filled, and unapologetically luxurious. Every element from the custom furniture to the state-of-the-art smart home technology represented a conscious choice rather than a compromise. I kicked off my heels and poured myself a glass of water, declining the wine I might normally have, chosen for such a momentous day. I needed absolute clarity for what came next. The transition at Pinnacle had only just begun, and the next 48 hours would be critical in establishing my leadership and vision for the company's future. My phone chimed with a text notification from an unknown number. We need to talk. This isn't over. N. I forwarded the message to Marco with instructions to add it to the restraining order documentation, then blocked the number. Nathan would find other ways to contact me, of course. Men like him always did. Each attempt would be documented, each breach of protocol added to the growing file that would ensure he never worked in the Portland tech industry again. As I prepared for bed, my phone rang with a call from Sophia Martinez, Marco's sister, and my first ally during those dark hospital days. Unlike her brother, Sophia had remained a nurse at Cedar Ridge Medical Center, continuing her work with patients facing medical crises similar to my own. I just heard the news, she said without preamble. Marco called me. I can't believe you actually did it, Emily. You actually took over Pinnacle. I smiled at her familiar directness. Sophia had been the one person who had treated me as a human being, rather than a patient case number during my hospitalization. It's been a significant day. That's the understatement of the century. Her voice softened. Are you okay? Not. The CEO of Pinnacle. You, Emily Wilson, the woman who survived sepsis and betrayal. Are you processing everything? The question was so perfectly Sophia, cutting through achievement to check on the human being beneath. I'm recalibrating, I admitted. For 3 years, every decision I've made has been in service to this moment. Now that it's here, there's a certain emptiness to it. That's normal after achieving any long-term goal, especially one born from trauma. The human mind needs new horizons. She paused. Have you considered what this means for your healing process? I moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the city lights. Today wasn't about healing, Sophia. It was about justice. They're not mutually exclusive, you know. Justice can be part of healing, but it's rarely the end of it. Her tone was gentle but firm, the same approach she'd used when encouraging me to take my first painful steps after surgery. What will you do with all the mental and emotional energy you've been directing toward Nathan and Pinnacle? The question echoed Marco's earlier inquiry, but from a different angle. Marco had asked about my professional future. Sophia was asking about my personal recovery. Both questions deserved thoughtful consideration. "I'm considering establishing a foundation," I said slowly, the idea crystallizing as I spoke, "for patients facing extended hospitalizations due to complications, particularly those dealing with financial exploitation during their vulnerability. Legal support, emergency funds, advocacy services." "The Emily Wilson Foundation?" Sophia's voice warmed with approval. "Using Pinnacle's resources to prevent what happened to you from happening to others?" "Something like that, though perhaps without my name attached." I traced patterns on the cool glass of the window. The experience with Nathan taught me how quickly security can be stripped away. Health, finances, relationships, a safety net for others facing similar circumstances seems fitting. "It's perfect," Sophia affirmed. "Taking something broken and creating something healing from its pieces. That's the Emily I've known since you were my patient." After ending the call with Sophia, I prepared for my first night as CEO of Pinnacle Technologies. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, integrating my leadership team, addressing the press inquiries already flooding the corporate communications department, navigating the complex legal landscape of incorporating Phoenix into Pinnacle's product portfolio. Yet for the first time in 3 years, I would face these challenges without the shadow of Nathan's betrayal driving my every decision. As I drifted toward sleep, my phone chimed once more with an email notification. The sender was Nathan, using his personal email rather than his now deactivated Pinnacle account. The subject line read simply, "The truth about what happened." I hovered my finger over the delete button, then hesitated. Whatever justifications or manipulations the email contained, they might prove useful for the continuing legal proceedings. I forwarded it unread to Marco with instructions to document it appropriately, then silenced my phone for the night. Nathan's truth no longer mattered. My own truth, carefully constructed through years of strategic planning and precise execution, had prevailed. Tomorrow would bring a new chapter, one written entirely on my terms. The morning arrived with a crystalline autumn clarity that matched my state of mind. I woke before my alarm, energized by purpose rather than adrenaline. My morning routine had been perfected over years of preparation. 30 minutes of yoga to center my thoughts, a light but protein-rich breakfast, and a careful review of the day's objectives, while my custom-blended tea steeped to precisely the right strength. By 6:30 a.m., I was already reviewing the overnight analytics from Pinnacle's global operations. Reports that would have normally gone to Nathan now flowed directly to me, providing real-time insights into the company's strengths and vulnerabilities. The data confirmed what I had already suspected. Beyond the healthcare division's prominent failures, several other departments showed signs of mismanagement that had been obscured by creative accounting and strategic misdirection. My first executive order of the day was sent at 7:15 a.m., an instruction to freeze all discretionary spending above $10,000 pending executive review. The measure would force any significant expenditures to cross my desk, allowing me to identify patterns of waste or potential malfeasance before they could be concealed. At 7:45 a.m., just as I was preparing to leave for the office, my secure line rang with a call from Richard Hartman. The former CEO had departed for retirement, with a generous compensation package and a non-disparagement agreement that prevented him from publicly questioning my acquisition or leadership. His call, less than 24 hours after my appointment, suggested he had already received concerning feedback. "Emily, I hope I'm not calling too early," he began, his voice carrying the forced joviality of someone attempting to establish familiarity where none existed. "I wanted to check how your first day went and offer any insights you might find valuable during the transition." "Good morning, Richard. I appreciate your concern," I replied, keeping my tone professional but distant. "The transition is proceeding according to plan. Was there something specific prompting your call?" A slight hesitation on the line. "I've received some Concerned messages from several board members regarding the spending freeze. It's causing some anxiety about potential layoffs or restructuring. I had anticipated this reaction. The board members most closely aligned with Richard and Nathan would naturally resist any change that threatened to expose their complicity in the company's mismanagement. The freeze is temporary and precautionary, I explained calmly. Standard procedure during leadership transitions. The board approved my full transition plan yesterday, including these preliminary measures. Of course, Richard backpedaled smoothly. I just thought I might offer my perspective on certain board members' particular concerns. Perhaps over lunch. The invitation was transparent, an attempt to establish himself as an unofficial advisor and potential ally. Under different circumstances, I might have considered maintaining such a connection for strategic purposes. But Richard's willingness to overlook Nathan's theft of my intellectual property and his role in my termination while hospitalized placed him firmly outside my circle of potential collaborators. My schedule is fully committed for the foreseeable future, Richard. If you have specific insights that would benefit Pinnacle, please send them in writing to my office. My team will ensure they receive appropriate consideration. Another pause, longer this time. When Richard spoke again, the forced warmth had evaporated. I see. Well, I'll be interested to see how your unique approach to leadership develops. The board can be quite traditional in their expectations. The board approved my appointment unanimously, Richard. Their expectations and mine are perfectly aligned to restore Pinnacle's market position and shareholder value after the significant decline under previous leadership. I checked my watch. If there's nothing else, I have a company to run. The call ended with perfunctory pleasantries, but the message had been clearly delivered on both sides. Richard had attempted to establish himself as a behind-the-scenes influence. I had decisively closed that door. The old power structures at Pinnacle were being dismantled, not merely rearranged. As my driver navigated morning traffic toward Pinnacle's headquarters, I reviewed the day's meeting schedule on my tablet. The executive team assembly at 9 a.m. would set the tone for the entire organization. By noon, the first phase of integration between Phoenix and Genesis would be announced. By end of day, the press release regarding Pinnacle's strategic repositioning would hit the financial wires, preparing shareholders and the market for the changes to come. The car pulled into the executive garage beneath Pinnacle's headquarters at precisely 8:30 a.m. The private elevator opened directly to the executive floor, where Michael was already waiting with my first coffee of the day and an updated briefing. Hackett. Good morning, Ms. Wilson, he greeted efficiently. Security reports no incidents overnight. Mr. Wilson made several attempts to contact various employees, but was unsuccessful due to the communication protocols you implemented. The executive team is assembling in Conference Room C as requested, and the IT transition team is standing by for your authorization to begin system integration. I accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. Any unexpected developments? Just one, Michael replied, falling into step beside me as we walked toward my office. Andrew Collins from Horizon Solutions called personally rather than going through channels. He wouldn't leave a message but requested you return his call at your earliest convenience. Andrew's call wasn't entirely surprising. My transition from Horizon to Pinnacle had been orchestrated with his full knowledge and tacit support. The acquisition serving both our interests by weakening a common competitor during Pinnacle's vulnerable transition period. Still, a direct call suggested matters beyond our carefully negotiated arrangement. I'll call him after the executive meeting, I decided. Have the preliminary market analysis on my desk by then. As I approached the executive suite, Nathan's former domain and now mine, I noticed the subtle changes already implemented overnight. The ostentatious artwork he had selected had been replaced with more subdued, thoughtful pieces. The aggressive red accent wall had been repainted in calming blue-gray. Even the lighting had been adjusted to create an atmosphere of focused productivity, rather than intimidating intensity. A small brass plaque beside the door now read simply, Emily Wilson, Chief Executive Officer. No grandiose title additions, no pretentious designations, just the position and authority clearly stated. The simplicity was deliberate, a sharp contrast to Nathan's tendency toward self-aggrandizement. Inside, the office had been similarly transformed. The oversized desk Nathan had specially commissioned to dominate the room had been replaced with a more practical workstation, arranged to facilitate collaboration rather than intimidation. The wet bar he'd installed for client meetings had been converted to a coffee and tea station. The walls now displayed framed patents and innovation awards rather than Nathan's collection of golf tournament photographs with corporate celebrities. I set my portfolio on the desk and took a moment to center myself before the day fully began. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Portland's skyline stretched before me, the same view Nathan had coveted and finally claimed with his promotion. Now it was mine. Not because I had married strategically or manipulated office politics, but because I had built something valuable enough to claim this space on my own terms. For just a moment, I allowed myself to acknowledge how far I had come from that hospital bed 3 years ago, broke, betrayed, and broken. The journey had required a hardness I'd never known I possessed, a calculated patience foreign to my nature before Nathan's betrayal. I had become someone new in the crucible of that experience. Neither better nor worse, perhaps, but undeniably stronger. The intercom chimed softly. Ms. Wilson, the executive team is assembled and waiting in conference room C, Michael announced. I gathered my materials and straightened my posture. Thank you, Michael. It's time to begin. As I walked toward the conference room where Pinnacle's future would be decided, I felt a profound sense of rightness. Not just the satisfaction of revenge accomplished, but the deeper fulfillment of having reclaimed my life's work and transformed it into something greater than it could have been before. Nathan had stolen my past, but in doing so, he had inadvertently given me a future with possibilities I might never have imagined otherwise. The door to conference room C opened before me. 12 faces turned in my direction, some curious, some apprehensive, all attentive. This was the moment where Emily Wilson, once dismissed as nothing more than Nathan's wife, would begin reshaping one of Portland's most influential technology companies. I took my place at the head of the table and began the next chapter. 6. Months had passed since my takeover of Pinnacle Technologies. Winter had given way to spring, and Portland's famous cherry blossoms painted the city in delicate pink hues. From my office window, I watched employees enjoying their lunch break in the newly redesigned courtyard, a space that had once been an underutilized concrete plaza, now transformed into a collaborative outdoor workspace with sustainable landscaping and comfortable seating areas. The change reflected the larger transformation taking place throughout the company. The quarterly earnings report sat open on my desk, its figures confirming what I had already known. Pinnacle was not merely surviving under new leadership, but thriving beyond market expectations. The integration of Phoenix platform had been completed a full month ahead of schedule, allowing us to recapture clients lost during Genesis's troubled deployment and expand into markets previously considered beyond our reach. Our stock had risen 47% since my appointment as CEO, and employee satisfaction scores had reached their highest levels in the company's history. A gentle knock at my door interrupted my reflection. Alexis Chen, my newly appointed Chief Innovation Officer, entered with the confidence of someone who had earned her position through merit rather than connections. She had been a mid-level developer when I took over, brilliant but overlooked by Nathan's administration due to her tendency to question flawed directives. The Portland Medical Center implementation is complete, she announced, her smile reflecting justifiable pride. Their chief of operations called personally to say it's the smoothest system transition they've experienced. Zero downtime. Complete. Data integrity, and the nursing staff is reporting an 80% reduction in documentation time. I nodded, genuinely pleased. That's excellent news, Alexis. Portland Medical was one of the first clients to abandon Pinnacle after the Genesis failures. Their return is particularly meaningful. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Have you had a chance to review the innovation grant applications? Alexis took a seat, her tablet already open to the relevant files. We've narrowed it down to 15 finalists. The committee is particularly impressed with a proposal from Cedar Ridge Medical Center, a machine learning application for early sepsis detection. The mention of Cedar Ridge and sepsis sent an involuntary shiver through me, a ghost of memory from those dark hospital days. Alexis noticed my reaction but tactfully continued without comment. She had been one of the few executives I'd taken into my confidence regarding my history with the company. Her discretion and integrity had proven invaluable during the transition. The Cedar Ridge proposal aligns perfectly with the Emily Wilson Foundation's mission, she noted, referencing the nonprofit I had established to support patients facing financial exploitation during medical crises. Their development team is primarily composed of medical professionals with first-hand experience in identifying sepsis progression. The technology could significantly reduce mortality rates. I reviewed the proposal summary on my tablet, impressed by the thoroughness of their approach. Schedule a meeting with their team for next week. If their methodology is as sound as it appears, we should fast-track both funding and engineering support. As Alexis left to make arrangements, my secure line rang. Marco Martinez, now heading the legal department, calling with his weekly update. The Singapore authorities have formally declined Nathan's application for employment visa, he reported without preamble. That's the fourth country where he's been effectively blacklisted from the technology sector. I had not actively tracked Nathan's whereabouts or activities since our confrontation, but Marco had maintained surveillance as a security precaution. Nathan's increasingly desperate attempts to rebuild his career had followed a predictable pattern. Initial confidence, growing frustration, and eventually desperate measures that further damaged his reputation. Has he violated the restraining order again? I asked, keeping my tone professionally detached. Not technically. He sent a letter to your mother's address in Seattle. Nothing threatening, just another attempt to explain his side of the story. Since the restraining order specifies no direct or indirect contact with you rather than your family members, it falls into a gray area. I sighed, closing the quarterly report. Forward a copy to the security team and update the file. If this is his most recent attempt at contact, perhaps he's finally moving on. That's actually what prompted my call, Marco replied, his tone shifting slightly. We've received a rather unusual request from a rehabilitation center in Eugene. Nathan has apparently enrolled in their 6-month recovery program for executive burnout and ethical remediation. The program director reached out through proper channels to ask if you would consider participating in their reconciliation process. I felt a momentary tightness in my chest, the last vestige of the pain Nathan had once been capable of inflicting. Absolutely not. Maintain standard protocols for all communication regarding Nathan. If he's genuinely seeking rehabilitation, that's his journey to make without my involvement. After ending the call, I moved to the sitting area near the window, taking a moment to center my thoughts. Nathan's latest maneuver was predictable, an attempt to reframe his situation as a temporary ethical lapse rather than a pattern of deliberate exploitation. The rehabilitation center likely represented his newest angle for rebuilding a professional reputation after conventional methods had failed. My phone chimed with a calendar reminder for my weekly lunch with Sophia Martinez. Despite her brother's rise to corporate legal prominence, Sophia had chosen to remain at Cedar Ridge Medical Center, recently accepting promotion to Director of Patient Support Services, a role she had helped create to address the non-medical needs of patients facing extended hospitalizations. We met at Riverside Cafe, the same place where I had first sketched the ideas that would become Genesis and later Phoenix. The restaurant had become something of a tradition for us, a reminder of how circumstances had changed while our friendship remained constant. "You look preoccupied," Sophia observed as she joined me at our usual table overlooking the water. "Let me guess, quarterly board meeting preparation?" I smiled, appreciating her perceptiveness. "Actually, Nathan has enrolled in a rehabilitation program and wants to include me in his reconciliation process." Sophia's eyebrows rose slightly. "And how do you feel about that?" "I don't," I replied honestly. There was a time when everything Nathan did affected me profoundly. First with love, then with pain, finally with determination. Now he exists outside the scope of my emotional consideration. "That's significant progress," Sophia noted, studying my expression carefully. "When we first met, your entire existence was defined by his betrayal. Now you can discuss him with the same detachment you might use for discussing market fluctuations." Her observation was accurate. The emotional transformation had been so gradual I had barely noticed its completion. Nathan had once been the central figure in my life's narrative, first as beloved husband, then as despised adversary. Now he was merely a footnote in a story that had grown far beyond him. Our lunch conversation shifted to more meaningful topics: the success of the Emily Wilson Foundation's first year of operations, Sophia's new patient advocacy program at Cedar Ridge, and the upcoming Portland Medical Technology Conference, where I would deliver the keynote address on ethical innovation in healthcare software. As we finished our meal, Sophia handed me a small gift bag. "A little something to commemorate an anniversary I suspect you haven't marked on your calendar." Inside, I found a beautiful fountain pen with an inscription on its case: "Author of her own story." I looked at her questioningly. "It's been exactly 1 year since you took over Pinnacle," she explained. 1 year since you rewrote the ending Nathan tried to impose on your life. I thought it deserved recognition." The gesture touched me unexpectedly. In the whirlwind of corporate transformation and foundation establishment, I had indeed lost track of this significant anniversary. "Thank you, Sophia, for this and for everything before it." She waved away my gratitude with characteristic directness. "You did the hard work. I just made sure you took your antibiotics and didn't give up when things seemed hopeless." Returning to Pinnacle headquarters after lunch, I found Michael coordinating final preparations for tomorrow's all-company meeting, where our second quarter results would be announced, alongside the official launch of Pinnacle's Healthcare Innovation Incubator, a project particularly close to my heart. The auditorium setup is complete, presentation materials have been distributed to department heads for review, and the catering for the reception has been confirmed, he reported efficiently. Also, Dr. Reynolds from Cedar Ridge called to personally thank you for the Foundation's grant. Their patient financial advocacy program has already helped 17 families avoid bankruptcy during medical crises. The mention of Dr. Reynolds, the same physician who had informed me of insurance problems during my hospitalization, brought a sense of completion to a circle that had begun in pain and confusion 3 years earlier. What Nathan had intended as an ending had instead become the catalyst for something far more meaningful than personal revenge or professional vindication. That evening, as I reviewed my notes for tomorrow's company address, I realized how thoroughly my perspective had shifted. The takeover of Pinnacle had been conceived as justice for a personal wrong, but it had evolved into an opportunity for systemic improvement, not just for a single company, but for the patients and healthcare providers who would benefit from Phoenix's superior architecture and the Foundation's supportive programs. My phone lit up with a text from Andrew Collins, my former employer at Horizon Solutions and now a strategic partner in several joint ventures. Wall Street Journal just called for comment on Pinnacle's remarkable turnaround, told them the industry hasn't seen anything yet. "Congratulations, Emily." I smiled at his message. remembering our first meeting when I'd slid that flash drive across the table, containing just enough of Phoenix to pique his interest. Andrew had seen potential where Nathan had seen only a resource to exploit. The difference defined their respective trajectories. Andrew now heading a thriving company in partnership with Pinnacle. Nathan seeking rehabilitation after systematic professional rejection. The following morning dawned clear and bright as I prepared for the all-company address. The auditorium was filled to capacity, with remote offices participating via video conference. As I took the stage, I surveyed the assembled employees. Many familiar faces, some new, all united by a shared vision that had replaced the culture of fear and favoritism that had characterized Nathan's leadership. 1 year ago today, I began, I stood before many of you as a stranger, your new CEO appointed through unexpected circumstances. Today, I stand before you as a partner in what we have built together. The presentation that followed outlined not just our financial successes, but the human impact of our work. Hospitals reporting improved patient outcomes through Phoenix. Implementation. Medical professionals citing reduced burnout due to more intuitive software interfaces. Families receiving support through the foundation during medical crises. The technology industry often measures success in market share and profit margins, I continued. Those metrics matter, and as you've seen in today's report, Pinnacle is excelling by those standards. But our true measure of success is found in the lives improved by our work, both within these walls and in the communities we serve. As the meeting concluded and employees filed out to the reception, many stopped to share personal stories of how the company's transformation had affected them. Developers finally seeing their innovations implemented. Account managers proudly representing products they believed in. New employees attracted by Pinnacle's growing reputation for ethical leadership. Later that afternoon, I stood in my office, watching the sunset paint Portland's skyline in golden hues. The view that Nathan had once coveted now served a purpose he could never have imagined, providing perspective for decisions that would shape healthcare technology for years to come. My executive assistant delivered the final item requiring my attention, the formal agreement for Pinnacle's acquisition of a small but innovative patient advocacy software company in Seattle. The move would expand our foundation's reach while incorporating valuable technology into our growing healthcare ecosystem. As I signed the documents, I noticed the date stamp on the digital signature line. Exactly 3 years to the day since I had discovered the empty bank account from my hospital bed. The symmetry seemed fitting. A circle completed, a new one beginning. The painful chapter that had begun with betrayal had transformed into something I could never have envisioned in those dark days. Not just professional success or personal vindication, but the creation of systems that would prevent others from experiencing what I had endured. Nathan had emptied an account. I had built an enterprise. He had sought to diminish me. I had grown beyond his comprehension. I closed the signed agreement and prepared to leave for the day. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to extend Phoenix's reach, new families to support through the foundation. The story continued, no longer defined by what had been taken from me, but by what I had created in its place. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.